What do Forrest Gump, Woody the pole chain cowboy, and Fred Rogers all have in common? They were all portrayed by the actor Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, this guy, his roles, they depict the life of a parent like none other. This is a parent at 7 in the morning. Now this is the same parent at 7 o'clock at night. Been there? Have you felt that? You know, Tom Hanks is one of the great actors of our day. Have you ever seen the movie Castaway? The SparkNote version is this. It's a story about a man who gets stranded on a deserted island, and his BFF is a volleyball. Volleyball. Tom Hanks is the only person on this planet that can get people to cry over a lost volleyball. Do you remember this? Here's this.
Wilson! I'm sorry! I'm sorry, Wilson! Wilson, I'm sorry!
It's heartbreaking. Tom Hanks gets millions of people to cry over a lost volleyball. Why? How? Well, typically at the Ridge, we teach through books of the Bible. For a few weeks, we're doing something different. We're introducing our new mission statement. It's short because we want everyone to remember it. Here it is. Connecting to Jesus, people, and purpose. Connecting to Jesus, people, and purpose. I invite you to read it with me. Connecting to Jesus, people, and purpose. Well, last week we dug into this one, Jesus. Today, people. Let's start where God starts. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created light, the sun and the stars, and he looked and he saw that it was good. So then he created the vegetation, the seed-bearing plants, the fruit-bearing trees. He looked and he saw that it was good. So next, he created the creatures of the sea, the birds of the air, the animals that dwelt on the land. You name it, he made it. Then God looked and saw that it was good. Interesting thing happens next. Chapter 2, verse 7, then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. What God did was amazing, but I'm also struck by what God didn't do. After each realm of creation, Genesis records this refrain, chapter 1, verse 12, and God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good, but he didn't say that after he created man. Well, why? Was something wrong with Adam? You know, after creating man, did God think, oops, I can do better than that? No. Genesis identifies the issue as this. Chapter 2, verse 18, God says, it is not good for the man to be alone. When God created Adam, he didn't say, oops. He said, incomplete. He said, Adam, you're alone. Adam, you need another. Adam, I'm going to make a wife for you. Next thing that happens, God parades all these animals that he's created in front of Adam. You know, the lions and the tigers and the zebras and the giraffes, and then came these guys, you know, the goats. And I imagine Adam, he's sitting there and he's got to be thinking, ooh, is that her? I sure hope that's not her. She's probably going to need to shave. Chapter 2, verse 18, it is not good for the man to be alone. Now, you may have heard that verse at weddings, but understand that verse isn't intended just for marriage. It's broader than that. It's also about this, connecting to Jesus, people, and purpose. People. People. We have been created by God to be in relationship with other people. That's not just a good idea, and that's not just something to say, yeah, that's a good rule of thumb. That is the way that God designed and created us. Does everybody know who this man is? Me neither. Ends up, this guy is the United States Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. In 2023, he declared that a new epidemic is sweeping through the United States. Not a virus, not a bacteria, not a drug or an addiction, but this, I'll quote him, he says, "Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been a public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health." He goes on to say that loneliness can be fatal. It's worse for your health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. According to Cigna Health, 61% of Americans self-identify as lonely. Gallup discovered that 40% express frequent feelings of intense loneliness. That's a number that has doubled in the past 25 years. According to a Duke University study, 25% of people do not have someone else that they can talk to about important matters. Another study indicated that 90% of adult men do not have even one true friend. And marriage doesn't eliminate this problem. According to Barna, 26% of married people feel lonely every single day. One of them put that this way. They said, "You have never known loneliness like the loneliness of lying in bed with someone and feeling unloved." How about you? Are you lonely? Maybe you go to a school with hundreds of other students, but are you lonely? Or maybe you're married, maybe you have kids, but are you lonely? Maybe you go to church with hundreds of other followers of Jesus, but are you lonely? And if you are, don't deny that. Listen to that. Let me ask it this way. Is anybody getting hungry? Yeah, I know, you're here, but I know some of you, you're already thinking about lunch, right? And it's like, when you say I'm hungry, we have about 17 minutes until you turn into a different person. Right? Hangry. Now I'm hangry. Tom Hanks in Castaway, when he was stranded on that deserted island, food, that was one of his biggest concerns. The feeling that he had, hunger, well, that was an important thing. We see in a situation like that hunger, well, it's not a bad thing. Hunger is actually a very important thing. It can be a life-sustaining thing. Don't deny it. Listen to it, because it's a clue about who we are. We are made with bodies that require food to survive. Just like hunger reveals that we are designed to eat food, loneliness, it reveals that we have been made to be in relationship with people. Loneliness, it's a God-designed hunger that drives us to this: people. Genesis 2:18. It is not good for the man to be alone. You may have heard of this, but I want us to take a few moments to really think about this. God said to Adam, He said, "Adam, you're alone." Was he? He was surrounded by all the animals. Remember, the animals had just paraded past him. He has all these animals. He's got a whole bunch of pets. God says, still alone. They don't count. Okay, well, if animals don't count, think about this. Who was Adam having this conversation with? Who was he talking to? Who was it that said those words? Well, God, right? Adam, he was talking face to face. God was there. God was right there. And still, God still says these words. Chapter 2, verse 18, it is not good for the man to be alone. The Bible seems to be teaching that God is not enough. Not enough. Not because God is inadequate, but because you and I have been created to be in relationship with people. This is not just a volleyball. It's Wilson. Well, not exactly. Full disclosure, this is a knockoff. Wasn't the one actually used in the movie. I got this thing used on eBay for about $10. What a deal, right? But you get kind of the idea and the concept. I wonder, how many millions do you think the Spalding Corporation would pay for this product placement today? Somebody in the Spalding marketing department blew it big time. Castaway. You know why I think Castaway has become a classic? Not just because of Tom Hanks. I think it's also because of his co-star, Wilson. Wilson wasn't just a volleyball. Wilson was a friend. Right? The author of the story recognized that Tom Hanks didn't just need shelter, didn't just need food, needed relationship. The genius of Castaway got us to bond with volleyball. What does that tell us? That tells us the same thing that the Bible does. Genesis 2, verse 18, it is not good for the man to be alone. We are created to be in relationship with people. Creation itself declares this one. God made a world that requires relationships to function properly. Fish, they swim in schools. Wolves, they have packs. Cattle have herds. Bees, they have swarms. God made a world that requires relationship to function properly. That's God's design. That's God's plan for this world and for your life. If you don't have friendships with people, something in your life is missing. There is a void that cannot be filled in any other way. Genesis 2, verse 18, God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. Have you ever felt alone? I have. Want to know the loneliest that I have felt in my life? Remember, it was middle school. Lunchtime. I walk into the lunchroom with hundreds of other students. Where do I sit? Who are my people? Where do I belong? Does anyone here know me? Does anyone here care about me? I felt sick in my stomach. Someone should figure out a way where no one is lonely. Someone did. Jesus. Jesus said it this way. John 13:34. A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. If we're going to do that, if we're going to follow Jesus, If we're going to follow this command, doing that, it requires this. It requires people. Jesus has a plan for loneliness, and his plan is for his followers to invest in relationships with each other and to embrace anybody who wants to be loved. Great theory. People, relationships. I imagine most of you are like, yeah, we believe that. We affirm that. Who doesn't believe in relationships? Who doesn't believe that people are important? That's a really easy thing to affirm and to value. But I want us not to ignore one very important part of this. There is a very big problem when it comes to this, to people, to relationships. The problem is sin. Hear what Genesis tells us happened as a result of sin. Genesis 3, verse 7 says, "Then the eyes of both of them," that's Adam and Eve, "were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves." What are they doing? Hiding. They're covering. They're isolating from God and from one another. Right after sin, right after the fall, first thing that we see, what happens as a result of that? Hiding, covering, isolating. And that tendency is now in us. God designed us to be in relationship with other people, but we have this tendency to drift toward isolation. And this is so common. As followers of Jesus, we are called to fight the drift. Fight the drift, to invest in relationship. You know, it's easier to believe in relationship than to actually be in relationship, because relationships get messy. There's a sin factor that enters in. And I've been there. I know the way this works. I know what happens. And maybe this is what's going on in some of your minds. I'm not going to go there, because what happens is, well, relationships, they get frustrating and they get exhausting and they get disappointing. Yes, they can get heated. They can get complicated. They can, hurt our feelings. Yes. I'll be candid. Other people will get on your nerves. Here's the good news. You will get on their nerves too. Right? It works both ways. It really does. Investing in relationship, that is a way we increase our capacity to love and to be loved. Yeah, they can be hard and difficult and consuming and challenging, but what God is saying here, he's saying, worth it. Worth it. Take a look at this. It's the cross. That is the center of the Christian faith. It's this belief that God came to earth in the person of Jesus and gave his perfect life as a substitute for our imperfect lives. But the purpose of the cross, it isn't just so we can have an altar call and then all go home. It's not just a moral, legal transaction that occurred so we can say a sinner's prayer and get to heaven. Hey, I'm now a Christian. I'm connected to Jesus. That's part of it. But that's not all of it. There is more. Through Jesus, I am connected to God, and I am also connected to all of you. Jesus, he didn't just die for sin. That's not how the story ends. Jesus didn't just die for sin. He rose from the dead because he conquered it. I don't have to be angry. I don't have to be jealous. I don't have to be bitter. I don't have to be selfish. We can forgive one another. We can serve one another. We can be patient with one another. We can give grace to one another. We can care about one another. The church is the result of Jesus conquering sin so that we can be reconnected with him and with one another. We're brothers. We're sisters. We're spiritual family. People. Relationships take a time investment. There are no shortcuts to that. Relationships take a time investment. If you're not willing to spend time with people, do not expect to develop relationships with people. that fair? If you're not willing to spend time with people, do not expect to develop relationships with people. Occasionally, I'll hear someone say something like this, like, I don't know anyone at the Ridge. Whose responsibility is that? Are you trying? How? You realize every single week a stage host comes up here and shares about ways to get involved. Every week. There's this event, there's this group, there's this gathering, this is happening. Every week they'll get up here and say, hey, you're invited to be able to try one of these things out. We do that every single week. Hundreds of people have developed relationships here. Well, how? Everyone. They end up telling you the same thing. Well, at some point in time, I had to take a step. I had to get involved. There are a lot of options. There are men's groups. You know that stat, 90% of men don't have a single friend? That's not the case here. You could get involved in a men's group. There are women's groups. There are community groups. There's young adults groups. We have youth group. All of these things are kicking off in the next few weeks. There's going to be lots of opportunities to say, well, I could get involved. I could check that out. If you're not involved in anything, I encourage you to fight the drift toward isolation. Fight the drift toward isolation. Today is what we call Connection Sunday. So at the end of the service, Joni Pine is going to get up here and tell us, real specifically, real clearly, what can we do if we want to experience and develop and build relationships? The big idea, you're invited. Right? We can't build relationships for you. The ball is in your court. Take a step. God puts that this way. Genesis 2:18. It is not good for the man to be alone. You have been created to be in relationships with people, spiritual friendships. And you aren't stranded on a deserted island, so you can do better than this. We make choices. We make investments. People who invest in relationships, these are the ones who build friends. Friends they can laugh with and cry with and learn with and share with and love and live and grow old together with. These are the people that research shows experience deep and fulfilling lives. Do you have that? Do you want that? Are you willing to prioritize that? Connecting to Jesus, people, and purpose. People. It's in there. It's in there because God is saying it's that important.